What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the fourth video in this series where we are teaching you to make $10,000 per month as a web designer. Now, this is the fourth video in our series, and we're going to be talking about the number one secret that helped me get to the level where I was making $9,000 per month. Now, in this video, I'm going to be breaking down a lot of what it takes to start signing more clients, and in particular, what you need to do during those early conversations with a prospect in order to get them to feel comfortable and be willing to not only hire you, but pay higher prices for your services. Now, before we get into that, the last three videos have done a really great job of preparing us for what we're going to talk about in this video. And so in the last three videos, we talked about refining your processes so you can get to a point where you're saving more time and stress and just getting a streamlined process for your website clients. The next thing that we talked about was finding the ideal clients and what you can do to cut the fat, or those clients that are causing you more stress and then not contributing as much to your revenue. And then in the last video, we talked about residual monthly services and how you can add those services and how much you can charge for those services in conjunction with your web design work in order to kind of build up a good monthly base revenue month over month. So if you haven't caught any of those videos, I will link those down below so you can watch them before you continue forward in this video. But with all that being said, let's dive into the single most important factor that goes into you making $9,000 per month as a web designer, and that is salesmanship. Now, I want to get ahead of the comments on this because I know a lot of you became designers because you wanted to avoid any sort of sales or negotiations, and the truth is you're not going to be able to get away from those things. Every aspect of your life is going to require some level of salesmanship or negotiation, and particularly as a web designer. This is a space that is continually getting more and more competitive, and we need to do something to set ourselves apart besides just have a fancy agency website. And that is where this video is going to come in. So what we're going to do in this video is I'm going to be sharing with you three very simple sales techniques that are going to make the world of a difference for you when it comes to your conversations with prospects and getting them to agree with you and agree to a contract and then getting them to pay you. And so before we dive into those three techniques, I want to share with you really what qualifies me to teach you sales techniques, right? And so if you haven't heard in some of my other videos, early on in college, I had the opportunity to work as a door-to-door salesman selling pest control contracts. And no, this was not the most glamorous job, and if you don't understand or if you haven't heard about these types of door-to-door sales jobs, they are tough jobs. What you do is I went out with a group of buddies, and we started our first summer in Los Angeles, California. And what we did is we would wake up every morning and get out to a random neighborhood by about 10 a.m. And I would go by myself to a neighborhood, and we would start knocking random doors, door after door after door. And when we would finally get people to answer the doors, we had a prepared pitch that essentially explained that my name is Payton, I work with a pest control company, we're going to be servicing other neighbors here in your neighborhood, and if we can get you guys done at the same time, there's going to be a discount. Now, within this pitch, there was a lot of different things that we would go through as far as what the service included and all of these different things, but essentially the goal of this pitch was within a 5 to 10 minute period, we were going to go from a complete stranger on their doorstep to them pulling out their credit card and allowing us to write it down on a piece of paper and charge their card and service their house within the next 24 hours. Now, this was a grueling job. We would work the entire morning up until about 3 o'clock. We would take a lunch break, and then we were back on the doors until about 9 in the evening when the sun would go down. So it was literally hundreds and thousands of doors even each and every day, trying to find just a handful of people that would buy pest control from us. And through this job, I learned a lot, right? It was a really difficult job, not only to get people to the point where they trusted me and were willing to give me their credit card right there on their doorstep, but also because there was at any given time 2 or 3 or 4 other pest control guys that had knocked on their door already that week. And so there was a lot of competition, and so we had to do things to kind of set ourselves apart and be more convincing and be better salesmen, really. And it wasn't about tricks or hacks or anything like that, and it certainly wasn't about being dishonest, but instead it was about connecting with these prospects and really getting them to like us, enjoy our presence, and be willing to kind of look past any anxieties that they had about buying pest control and look past those because they liked us and they wanted to do business with us. And so these techniques that I'm going to be sharing with you today are techniques that I learned during this job, which I did for about 4 years. And I'm going to show you how they apply to our job as a web designer or a freelancer, and how you can implement these to close more deals and get your prospects to like you more than any other web designer out there and be willing to pay you more than anybody else. So let's dive into it. So the first technique that I want to talk about has to do with smiles, head nods, and the word yes. So we had this rule in our door-to-door sales group that if you couldn't get a prospect to say yes and agree with you several times throughout your 5-minute pitch, there was absolutely a 0% chance that they were going to buy from you, right? Because if they're not saying yes to the things you're talking about throughout your pitch, they're not going to randomly say yes at the end and give you their credit card. Smiling, head nodding, and saying the word yes releases positive endorphins in the brains of our prospects. And if we can get them to do these 3 things several times throughout our pitch or our conversation, they're going to feel a lot better about our communication. They're going to feel a lot better about what we're explaining to them. And the chances go way, way up of them agreeing at the very end and being willing to pay us and hire us. Now, if you're anything like me, I'm sure you found yourself in one of those really awkward situations where you're either on the phone or in person trying to sell somebody on your web design services. And you're just talking and talking and talking, and you're trying to share with them all of the features and the benefits and how great it is to work with you. And it's just silent on their end, right? They're not saying anything, they're not agreeing, they're not moving. And it feels like you're just droning on and on and on. And you can feel yourself losing them, right? You can feel kind of that disconnect where it's like they're not agreeing or understanding what I'm saying, and I'm just talking too much. And so we timidly wrap up our endless droning on, and we say something awkward like, how does that sound? And this type of pitch or communication will never work. And I'm sure that if you think back on all of the different prospects that have actually hired you, most all of them were agreeable, right? At some point they said yes, and they agreed to not only the value of your service, but the need to have services that you offer, right? And they were just super agreeable, and they were head nodding, and there was some sort of connection there. And so if you're not making that connection with a prospect, there is 0% chance that you're going to get them to hire you. Now, with that being said, sometimes as web designers, we feel like if somebody's just not being agreeable, that there's no way to sell them, when in fact, it's completely up to us whether or not they're going to be agreeable. And there are certain things that we can do to get them to agree and head nod and smile and kind of bring them along this conversation with us to the point where we know they're understanding us at every single level, and by the end, they're agreeing enough with us that they feel comfortable to say yes, or at least to open up to us and let us know where they're at in the whole buying process. So here's what you need to do in order to get those yeses and smiles and head nods. First off, you need to slow down. Stop trying to go a million miles an hour and explain every little detail of your service and every single case study that you have, because those things don't work if you're just smashing this information into their face without giving them a chance to digest and give you feedback and share some of what's on their mind. More often than not, when you're just going a million miles an hour like this, they're thinking about something else in their mind, or they're just waiting for you to pause so they can interrupt you and tell you they're not interested. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to slow down, we're going to ask questions, and we're going to give breaks in our communication so that they can interject in a positive way, and then there can be some sort of dialect back and forth so that they do have the chance to agree with you and tell you about their situation and tell you about any concerns they have. And by doing this, you're going to have a lot better chance of getting them to agree and smile and head nod. Now, the best way to get them to smile and head nod is something we call mirroring. And so if we can give really big smiles at them, they're going to smile back. The same goes for head nods. If we can talk and ask questions in a way that end with a head nod, and then we stop and we wait for them to return the head nod, that is a subtle way that they're agreeing with us. And even if they don't realize it in their subconscious, they're kind of nodding and feeling good and agreeing. And before they know it, they're completely on the same page as us without them even really recognizing that. So To give you an example of how all of this works, let's assume that we jump into a client conversation and immediately I'm off to the races saying, here's what it's like to work with us. And obviously you need traffic and we're going to generate traffic, and the traffic's going to be really good because it's going to generate revenue for you. And our websites are going to be more productive and more efficient than anybody else's websites. This is a bad example, right? That is just way too much information. We didn't give them any chance to give us feedback, to smile, to head nod. And chances are they're just sitting there like... So instead, here's a good example. You're gonna get into that conversation and you're gonna say something like, so you guys already have a website, right? And you're gonna pause and wait for them to agree and say yes and head nod back. And then you're gonna ask something like, so how's that been working for you guys? By asking this type of question, you're opening it up to them to give a very controlled response that still has to do with what you're trying to communicate to them. Then you're going to continue forward and say, now I believe that your website should be your #1 salesperson, but at the same time, I know that you're super busy, right? And there's a lot to do as a business owner. You've got employees to keep happy and customers to satisfy. And with all of these things, you don't really have the time to stay on top of your website, right? Now again, with these types of pauses and questions and head nods and smiles, we're giving them the ability at every step of the conversation to agree with us and to make sure that we're bringing them along this conversation with us. And it's kind of a more fluid conversation back and forth. And I promise you that if you can do this throughout your whole conversation, just slow down, get them to agree with you, get them to say the word yes as many times as you can. By the end of this conversation, you're both going to be on the same page, and then it's not going to be awkward for you to say something like, well, what do you think? Because they're already going to have told you what they think and where they're at and what concerns they have. And so by doing this, getting these head nods and smiles and getting them to agree, it's going to make your entire conversation with these prospects much, much easier, much more fluid and natural. You're not going to feel awkward. It's going to be a fun conversation. And just with this tactic, you're going to have a much stronger connection and relationship with this prospective client than other web designers will. I can guarantee that. So the second technique that I want to talk about is running through smoke screens. So a smoke screen is very similar to an objection or a concern, which is essentially just them telling you, this is the reason that I feel uneasy about paying you or buying your services. However, the thing that's different about smoke screens is they are less at the core of the prospect's kind of worries and more something that they throw out there to either get rid of you because they feel like they're not interested, or even more commonly for them to delay any sort of decision, even if they do feel like it could be a good decision to hire you. Now, some examples of smoke screens are, I'm just a little too busy right now to worry about a website. Or people also might say, nah, I've done this before and it didn't really seem like it worked, so I don't think we need it. Now, these are very kind of surface level objections that people are going to throw out to kind of deter you. And most web designers are going to get scared off by these smoke screens and they're going to say, okay, I understand. Well, just call me back if you change your mind. And if you give up this easily when they're throwing out smoke screens, you're never going to make the sale, obviously. But even more importantly, if you can push through these smoke screens in the proper way, people are not only going to be impressed with you, but it's going to make them like you more, okay? Now, with that being said, we need to remember the #1 rule of smoke screens and concerns, and that is don't just blow right through those. If you blow through someone's concern or smoke screen, they're going to get irritated, they're going to be frustrated, they're going to feel like you ignored them, and they're going to tell you to get lost. And so that is the first step to this process, is when they throw out a smoke screen, for example, when they say, we're just too busy right now and can't really think about a website right now. You're going to say something like, definitely, I totally understand that it's busy being a business owner, right? And right there, we've kind of slowly made our way past that smoke screen. We understood what they said, we listened to them, and even right there, I'm going to get a head nod and a yes because I said it's busy being a business owner, right? And then head nodding. And so by doing that, we have kind of made them feel like we heard what they said. But then the next step to this is we are going to kind of slowly push past that and transition smoothly into talking more about our services. So in order to transition without coming across as aggressive or salesy, we're going to want to say something to the effect of, definitely, I totally understand that you're busy. Just so you have an idea of what we are offering, that way if things clear up, you can consider it. Here's what we're doing with our websites that are going to save you time and hassle and could potentially even bring in some higher value clients that will pay you a lot more without you having to have 10 different small clients causing you a lot more headache. And so here's how we do that. And so by kind of having that smooth transition and overcoming that and saying, I totally understand, but listen to us just in case things clear up for you, you can see how this is a non-aggressive way to make that transition and then to go right back into your pitch. Now, I would say this year alone, probably 30 to 35% of my new clients were people that threw out smoke screens like this at the start of our conversation to either try to get rid of me or just to delay the decision. And by overcoming these smoke screens really smoothly like this, I was able to turn them into awesome clients that I now have a fantastic relationship with. So this is something that works, and you need to be aware of this going into calls with prospective clients, that they're going to throw these things out. You're going to see these smoke screens, and if you can have kind of prepared a couple things to say to acknowledge that you heard them and you know where they're coming from, but also transition back into your pitch, it's going to be a lot easier to get these people to a point where they trust you, they feel comfortable with you, and then the conversation is going to go up and it's going to be a lot more natural, and they're going to end up being clients. Now, the third technique that I want to talk about is something we call RAC, which stands for Resolve, Ace, and Close. Now, this is something that I've talked about in other videos, but I absolutely love this technique, and this is something that's completely changed the sales of my web design business. And basically what this is while smoke screens are more of like a surface level concern, people are going to have legitimate concerns and objections that could hold them back from purchasing your services or buying a website. And typically these come towards kind of the middle or the end of a conversation, and people are going to bring up these big concerns that are going to hold them back if you can't overcome them. And some of these really common concerns are things like it's just way too expensive, or we're already too busy, we have too many customers and we can't keep up with it, or just saying something like we're not really interested right now. These are real concerns. And what we're going to do is we're going to walk them through this process of resolving that concern and then throwing them an ACE, which is an extra incentive to incentivize them to buy. And then we're going to close them and give them the opportunity to agree and say yes. So in order to resolve these, there are a couple things that we need to do. And so to show you this, I'm going to give you an example. Let's say that the client says at the end of a conversation, that's just too expensive. I think that's probably beyond our budget, so I don't think it's going to work for us. Sure, I totally understand. I know you guys have a lot of expenses. And the best part about a website is if we do it the right way, it's not going to be an expense, but instead is going to be an investment. And I can guarantee that if we do it the right way and if we work together, it's going to make you way more money than you ever spend on it. Now, I know you guys don't want to have just another expense, so here's what I can do to make it make sense for you guys. Now, just like that, I have acknowledged their concern and then I've overcome it. Now, the next part is jumping in to our ACE, which again is an incentive to kind of help put them up over the hump and feel like this is going to be worth it to them. So here's what I'm going to say. Here's what I can do for you guys. I know you want to make sure that this is a really good investment and that it brings you a lot of new revenue as fast as possible. So normally I'm charging an extra $900 for an SEO audit, which actually helps kind of go through this process and sets things up and gets you put on Google faster so you guys can get more clients. Now, this is a lot of extra work for my team, and that's why we normally charge that extra $900. But if you guys would be willing to give me a shot today, I know that this will certainly be worth your money as an investment. I'd be willing to throw that in completely free. Now that we've done that, we're going to work towards the close. We'd definitely be willing to do that completely free for you guys. Does that sound fair? Now, by using that simple close of does that sound fair, and then giving them a big smile and a big head nod, and then just waiting for them to respond, not saying anything, but just letting them think on it, I found that about 70% of the time, people are going to say, yeah, that does sound fair. Let's go ahead and do it. And you've taken them through this entire resolve, ACE, and close process. Now, they're not going to say yes every single time. And chances are, even though you resolve that first concern, they might come up with a second concern. And if that's the case, walk them through that resolve, ACE, close process again and again and again. And as long as you're not coming across as aggressive and they truly feel like you're trying to understand what they're saying and then throw in additional value, they're going to love you for it. And even if they say no at the very end, if you do this the right way, they're going to love you and they're going to say, man, you're a really great salesman. We really want to hire you, and when the day comes that we're ready to hire somebody, you're definitely going to be the person that we call. So we've covered these 3 powerful strategies, right? We talked about head nods and yeses and smiles and how those can completely affect the whole tone of the conversation. We also talked about blowing through smoke screens in a very tactful way that makes people feel understood and heard, but also allows you to get back into your pitch and your conversation. And then the third thing is we talked about resolve, ace, and close, and how this process can help you overcome those bigger objections and throw in some additional services or bonuses to make people feel like the decision is going to be worth it. Now, I could literally create a video that's 10 hours long on these 3 strategies, and there's a lot about these strategies that I didn't get to touch on in this video, but I promise you, if you implement these 3 strategies and you work at them and you come up with different ways to resolve concerns and different aces or additional services that you can throw in, I promise you that you will see a massive increase in your web design sales. This is something that once I implemented, it was like I was closing maybe 2 out of 10 website clients, and now at this point I'm probably closing about 9 out of 10 of them. Because when you're on the phone with people, there always is some sort of interest at some level. And so if you can overcome objections and blow through smoke screens and get people to agree with you, this whole process is going to be super fluid, and people are going to be blown away by how professional you are and by how smoothly that process went, that they're going to say yes and they're going to want to work with you. I can guarantee that. So what I'm going to do is down in the comments, I'm actually going to post some of my additional aces that I throw in, some of those like extra service bonuses that I throw in. I also am going to throw in some of the most common objections that I get from prospective website clients. I'll throw all of those down below so you guys can start looking through those. Please feel free to add to them if there are any consistent concerns that you guys get when you are trying to sign new website deals. But I promise you these strategies are going to be really powerful. And then if you can increase your abilities as a salesman, it is going to help take you beyond that $9,000 per month mark. And you can see how we're starting to group together our processes and our game plan and our services and now our salesmanship to get us to the point where we're almost making $10,000 per month. So thank you so much for watching, and we'll catch you guys in the next video.